From the people who help you know your competition, InteliChek presents the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast. The Multi-Point Inspection Podcast brings you news and stories from the automotive world told in an informative and entertaining way.
I think struggling, when we came from Cuba, we all lived in a one-bedroom apartment. So you're talking about my grandfather, my grandmother, two aunts and uncle, my mom and myself, all in a one-bedroom apartment in a country where we did not know the language. And everybody is getting a job. My grandmother, my grandfather, my mom worked in a toy factory in Miami.
Arnold Gacita is no stranger to struggle.
And little by little, my grandfather became a carpenter. And, my dad, when he came, he became a painter. And you start little by little growing in that. But there is something to be said to, you're not going to have food and you can't get the two-bedroom apartment unless we all go out there and hustle and work hard and get money on the table.
And he is no stranger to success either.
We're in Central America. We're in all of the Americas. So we're in Canada, U.S., Mexico, Central and South America. We are in New Zealand, Australia. We are in Europe, Germany, France, Netherlands, Middle East, Oman, Dubai, Emirates, Saudi, Bahrain. We are now in parts of Northern Africa. It's incredible. We deal a lot now with all the languages we got to put on labels.
And with faith, family, and a lifetime of experiences that we can only imagine to help keep him grounded, he believes that you're never too big to do the right thing.
And those things teach you things, right? So the first job you have and how hard it was and how little you got paid and how your boss was, that led you to the second job. And then that second job teaches you all these things, right? It's the school of hard knocks, and that leads you to the third job. And all those steps, I think, are an unbelievable university. You cannot put a price on that type of education, but you learn to appreciate things differently. You don't take things for granted. You thank God every day for what you got. You realize that it's a gift from God. And you're more grateful and thankful. And I think you look at people differently.
This is his story.
My name is Arnold Gacita, and I am the president and CEO of Petra Automotive Products.
Arnold was born into Fidel Castro's Cuba, but his family had been making arrangements to get out from under the dictator's thumb long before little Arnold arrived on the scene.
I came very young, but I was born in Cuba. I tell my parents that I missed being president of the United States by 7 months. So I was born in Cuba. 7 months later, we came to America. Obviously, Cuba was taken over by a communist socialist dictator. My grandfather owned a grocery store and meat market. He saw what was happening. He saw that this was not going to be good for anybody that was in business or anybody that was an entrepreneur and thought for themselves. And they decided to start working on getting our family out of Cuba before Fidel even became president. So Fidel was making noise up in the mountains and what he was going to do. By the time Fidel took over, he did take my grandfather's store away and meat market away, took everything that my parents owned away, basically left him with one car, one house, and then, you become part of a system. By then, my grandfather got permits, got the residency to come to America, which is like the biggest lottery you can win. My name and my father's name were not on that paperwork because when my grandfather applied, which was prior to Fidel taking over, my mother wasn't married and I wasn't born. So they had to do a little bit of scrambling to get my name and my father's name on it, which was granted. The U.S. granted me and my father to come along with the rest of the family. But my father was punished for wanting to leave Cuba with us, and he had to stay back for a year and work the sugarcane fields. And so a year later, he was granted to come to America. It's one of those immigrant stories. America is the best place still today, I think, to live in. It still gives you the most opportunities. We need to protect those opportunities and not let them go, because I do think that there is a part of the society that has never lived through something like Eastern Germany or Cuba or Russia and realize, what socialism and communism really is. And so we were blessed to get out of Cuba, thanks to God and the foresight of my grandfather. We came to America. We embraced it, never looked back. I remember my grandfather telling me, my grandfather passed away about a year and a half ago at 98 years old. My grandfather never looked back, never went back to Cuba. He said, we're Americans. We're coming to America, assimilated, and just never looked back. It is the American dream, especially for an immigrant, to do what we were able to do.
So what about Arnold's journey in the automotive industry that led him to where he is today with Petra?
I've been in the industry now for this May. So this month, I will be 32 years in the automotive aftermarket industry. I know I look like I'm only 25, but I've been in it for 32 years. And in fact, my oldest son, who just turned 32, he was obviously months in being born when I got into this business. But I started with the largest company of this type, oldest company of this type. Started at the local level and the distribution level. So worked for a distributor for that company. Within 7 years, we became the number one distributor for that company. And then I moved on to the corporate world and grew little by little until I became vice president of sales and marketing. We ended up selling the company and stayed on with the new company for about 5 years. And sitting at the house of one of our clients, he looked at me and said, I think you should open your own company. That was 14 years ago. After a lot of prayer and talking to a lot of friends, I decided to do it 14 years ago. So I left that company, opened my own. And when we opened Petra 14 years ago, I remember we looked at each other like, man, what are we doing? Here we go. Fast forward 14 years, a lot of work, God's favor and grace, and the right people on the team. We are in 48 countries. We're in about 5,000 dealerships nationwide. We manufacture product for 2 OEs and continue to grow. We have over 360 SKUs. We're heavily involved in the dealership side of it. So OEMs and the dealership world, we sell everything through distribution. So we manufacture, sell it to distributors. They sell it to dealers. And I'll tell you what, 14 years, having the time of our life, I'm so glad I did it.
And for the uninitiated, what exactly does Petra do?
We manufacture all the products that your car needs inside and out. So any fluid or any shop supply to maintain your vehicle, we manufacture it. And we also manufacture detail lines. So to make your car look pretty and smell pretty, we do that as well.
If you go to the Petra website, you'll see a timeline that shows the unbelievable growth of the company since launching in 2010. Including going international in just 8 short months. Arnold says that this is due to the people he has around him.
We've been blessed, man. We had people that came with me. We had distributors that came with us. We had distributors from all competitors that came with us, employees, people that came with us from all different parts of the industry, not only my competitors, but big oil companies. Again, I tell people all the time, that God handpicked everybody that we have on this team to be part of the puzzle, and the puzzle works because we're all part of it, and it wouldn't work if we weren't all part of it. And we just have the right people fitting at the right place, and it's been incredible. The ex-president of one of my biggest competitors is our VP of R&D. The guy that used to handle Asia for my previous company is our Asian and Middle East manager. Arnold grew up in this business and has knocked it out of the park. The largest oil company in the world, their national account sales manager is now my national account sales manager. God could not have put more. We're just blessed with the people we have.
And one of those people surrounding Arnold is his son, Arnold Gacita Jr. So I asked Arnold how he navigated instilling the gratitude that his immigrant family had to the next generation without them enduring the same struggles.
No matter what you do as a parent, you cannot recreate that if it's not happening for real. No matter how much you love your kids, you can't recreate it, right? It's like your first son, right? So when I had my first son, I was at a certain level economically. Then the second son is at a different level. They say that my daughter got it all the benefit, right? Because when my daughter came along, she got a lot of benefits that everybody else didn't get. And so it's hard, no matter what you do, and no matter how hard you try to teach it, and you need to teach it, and there's value in that. If they don't live it, it's hard. Now, having said that, we try not to give our kids everything, right? We try to say no as often as we say yes. My wife may do better at that than me. My son, when he started in our business 14 years ago, he was working in the warehouse. No air condition, sweating his butt off, and making product and building kits and putting things together and shipping and receiving. And he did that for a few years. Then after that, we put him as a delivery guy. Then after that, we put him as a salesman, a route salesman. Then after that, and he little by little grew in the business. And today he's vice president of sales and marketing. But it took him 14 years to get there. And you can talk to any of our distributors. Arnold has a sense, probably not like me or my family that came from Cuba and went through what we went through, but he does have a sense of, this is hard. I start at the bottom. Arnold Jr. walks to warehouse, talks to everybody in the warehouse. He did it. He was there. And distributors can get that sense from him. He really knows his business inside and out, but it was purposely done that way. We purposely wanted him to start at the bottom and earn his way to the top. And I think he's doing a good job of that. But there's definitely something to be said that you cannot teach the living and going through it. My grandfather had the Cuban military come to his store, ask him to step out. They chained the stores that he had worked all his life for, dedicated, spent money on, and told him never to come back. We can't teach that. That's an experience.
Arnold is always quick to praise his team when talking about Petra. So I asked him if his leadership skills came naturally, or was it something he had to learn along the way?
I think you learn it. I think you learn it from your family. I learned my work ethics from my grandfather and my dad, two immigrants that came to this country and did whatever needed to be done to make sure that their family was successful. I saw my dad work 18-hour days for weeks and months. So I learned the work ethics from them. I remember my grandfather telling me that if I ever became president of a company and there was nothing to do, to pick up the broom and start sweeping, right? You're never too big to do the right thing and be the first one in, first one out. So I think your family, my grandfather, my dad, start teaching you some of these things. Your faith teaches you that as well. And then I had a great mentor where I was, probably for the last 7 years or so of that, maybe 10 years or so of those 18 years, I had a great mentor. We traveled everywhere, went everywhere. I learned a lot from him. I say this before I tell people I learned what not to do and what to do. Sometimes what not to do, right? I think everybody has to have a mentor. I had two great mentors actually in business when I started, towards the beginning and in the end. And then the family, and then your faith. And so people are important. If you're a leader that leads, right? So you cast the vision and you bring the right people on to move towards the vision that you have. You need to let those people do it and get out of the way. I also say, and I also believe that if you don't care who gets credit, you can do a lot of things, right? If you don't have the ego and the pride where it's got to be me and my name's got to be on there and I got to do this. If you don't care who gets credit, you're going to go a long way. People will do many things. And if your team has that mentality of, hey, we're going to do the right thing for Petra no matter what, and no matter who gets credit, you're going to go a long way. We have two themes that we have. If you come to Petra, you'll see banners. One is called Impact. Individuals making personal adjustments to change things. Everybody in this place is empowered to do the right decision. The warehouse guy doesn't have to ask his manager, do I ship a box that's leaking? No. The right answer is you don't. Right? And the next one is make them a raving fan. Our clients are not customers, they're clients, and we want to make them a raving fan. We strive for perfection. We know we're not perfect. We make mistakes, but we strive for it. And our goal is that our clients become raving fans, not just a fan, a raving fan. That's the culture that we have here. We kid around, we play around, we argue sometimes, but we're a family. We know we can argue, we can disagree, we can walk away, we do the right thing for Petra, we keep moving. Most of the times it seems to be always in agreement. We just got a good group of guys. They just really, the culture here is really, really great.
We discuss how Petra is giving back to the community by solving multiple issues at once with Petra Cares, how Arnold entered the podcast world with a show that gives Hollywood a run for its money, and more, after a word from our sponsor. Perception is not always reality.
And, there's this perception that the dealerships are more expensive for everything. And InteliChek kind of confirms that that's not the case.
InteliChek helps dealerships become aware of where their prices stand in regard to their competitors.
And InteliChek does a good job of giving us that pricing data to confirm that we're in the market.
And this allows dealerships to make their customers aware of their competitive pricing.
I placed 2 placards in the business center so they could see that while they're over there working on computers. I also placed it in our coffee area. We have a glass wall there, so when they walk in, as they're putting their creamer and sugar in their coffee, they're going to look up and see the pricing for our pricing as well as our competitors.
Introducing InteliShare. InteliShare contains all of InteliChek's promotional tools that you can use to promote your favorable prices, including Intella Ads, the printable flyers that you can show off in easel displays, Intella Media for your digital media boards, and Intella Widgets, so you can show off price comparisons on your website and even let your customers schedule from the widget.
Just having access to that data that they're able to provide gives us a good plan of how we're going to proceed.
Call 877-827-7273 or go to InteliChek.com to find out more about how the InteliShare series can help you grow your business.
I've been involved with a charity called Giving Hope out of New Orleans for many years. A good friend of mine, Troy Duhan, the guy builds an orphanage once a year somewhere around the world, and he feeds like thousands of people in New Orleans. I'm still involved with this charity. We built an orphanage together in 2019 in Brazil. And so I wanted to copy that. So my intent was Petra Cares was going to be like Giving Hope. And I put this phenomenal board together. Again, I believe in people and having the right people. So we put this board of prominent people in Houston, all in different kind of segments. And we started creating Petra Cares. So my intent from day one was we were going to copy Giving Hope. We're going to build an orphanage somewhere around the world, and we're going to feed the hungry in Houston. I was also chairman of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so we decided to have some guest speakers. And so one of those guest speakers was Judge Eric Andel, which oversees many of the family court cases in Harris County, where Houston is at. Harris County is the second largest county in the United States. So we bring him in as a guest speaker to the board. And he's one of those people that God used to come in, slap us around, tell us we were wrong, and get our act together. So he comes in and says kind of like, oh, that's cute, that's nice, you're going to build an orphanage, blah, 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 blah. He goes, if you really want to change the world, if you really want to impact the world, let me tell you what the problem is. And nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to address it. It's not sexy and it's not pretty. So he tells us that when a kid is not adopted, typically if they're not adopted by the age of 10, they're not going to be adopted. On average, they'll move homes every 2 years. So think about it. From 10 to 18, you've lived in 4 homes. You've gone to 4 or more different schools. And you really don't have any parental guidance. You're just like a number in a system, and you're going through this maze. When they get to 17, 18, or 19 years old, they either have to graduate from high school or quit and get a GED. If they graduate from high school, and if they qualify, most states will pay for their university studies. 90% will say no. 90% of these kids, even if they qualify, are going to go, I want out. I'm tired of being in the system. I'm tired of being a number, and I'm tired of jumping out. Well, immediately at that point, they're out of the system. Here's your luggage. They stop paying the people that are taking care of them, and they become homeless. Now, some Other charities that have housings may pick them up, and they may end up in a religious housing area or a business housing area that will bill the government for their housing. And there's all these kind of grants to help them in housings under the condition that they're looking for a job, getting their act together, stay out of drugs, or go to school. So what we do is we find them either on the street. I mean, we literally have had people that have been homeless that we have had to find a housing for, or we go to these housing agencies and we talk to these kids about, the first thing we did was mechanic. So we talked to them about being a technician. In the US, there's a shortage of 100,000 technicians, okay? 100,000 technician shortage. So we talked to them about being a technician. We partnered with Lone Star College, which is the local college system here in Houston. They're also the largest college system in the US. When we say partner, we pay for everything, but the professor works for them, and we have to pay the professor, okay? But the professor is an employee of Lone Star, and when the kids go through our program, they get 2 college credits, and they get a certificate from Lone Star. So our training facility here at Petra, right now, the Lone Star professor is in there teaching Petra Cares, teaching the kids. So we take these kids that have exited the foster care program, that are out on the street, disadvantaged, parentless, homeless. We bring them to Petra. We pay for everything except housing. We pick them up, transportation, uniform, get them their license if they need it, give them a stipend for coming in, everything, food, we feed them. So we bring them in and we give them everything but housing. And in a 7-week course, we turn them into a level 1 technician. And then the dealers that we have come in and hire them. They literally come in here and interview them. And then on graduation, which we're having one on May 10th, it's like a sports draft. So we'll say, Brandon graduated and he's going to Fred Haas Toyota, and we do that kind of a celebration.
Petra Cares takes on 2 problems at the same time by not only helping young adults coming out of the foster system find gainful employment, but also with combating the technician shortage. But the trickle-down effect doesn't stop there. Arnold explains this and shares Petra Cares' achievements by the numbers.
So we have a 76% graduation rate. The national average for foster kids that were adopted is 2%. So foster kids that were adopted, the national graduation rate is 2%. Think about that. Our graduation rate on foster kids that were not adopted is 76%. Our placement rate is 85%. Okay. And the placement rate loyalty is 100%, meaning that every job they went to when they left our class, they're still working at that company, which is huge. So we've had this incredible record of what's happening in the lives of these kids. I don't know if you know this, but the prison system in the US, 80% of the people in the prison system has touched the foster care program at one point in their lives. So if we can get these kids that are in the foster care program, love on them, educate them, hold their hand, mentor them, get them a job, make them part of society, we're changing their world and all their generations to come. And we will, as time goes by, impact the prison system in the U.S. These kids are loyal because you gave them that chance. It's not like, they grew up in it, they're loyal to it. And it's turned out tremendously. Listen, we've had kids, you can see the videos on the Petra Cares website, but we had a kid that he never knew his father. His mom stabbed him 7 times. So she goes to jail. The kid goes in the foster care program, right? You tell somebody that and they can't believe it, because most of us live in a bubble. But there's some serious problems going on in this world. And the foster care system seems to be wrapped in it. And so if we can fix that, we'll change the world.
And if that wasn't enough, Petra Cares is expanding its scope and reach.
And that's what matters. And at the end of the day, when we all pass on, nobody's going to talk much about how much Petra sold. I mean, we need to sell it and we need to grow and it needs to be a powerful and great company like it is. And that helps fund things for everybody, their livelihood and other things. But at the end of the day, when we pass, it's going to be about these kids and the people that we touched and changed their lives. And, if you see them, the stories are incredible. It'll break your heart. You cannot be at one of these events without tears coming down on your eyes. And no matter how many times I go to it and how many times I bite my tongue and I say I'm not going to cry, it's tough. So just so you know, we're expanding it to Los Angeles, and we're also expanding the program from technician to accounting. So this year we'll be teaching technician. There'll be a technician class and there'll be an accounting class. And next year, there'll be technician, accounting, medical assistant. So we're expanding to other trades as well.
If there's one thing we've learned about Arnold from this episode, it is that he doesn't do anything halfway. Well, the same can be said for his podcast, Wheels, Deals, and Meals, that looks more like a television series you'd find on the Food Network than a typical podcast.
Welcome to Wheels, Deals, and Meals, where we talk all things good food, good business, and good cars. And now, here is your host, Arnold Gacita, founder and CEO of Petra Automotive Products.
So I've been a guest on several podcasts. I've been guest speaker at many events. And so I'm always the guest to all these things, and in the industry and outside the industry, I'm actually. So my son, who's our VP of Sales and Marketing, is like, you really should do your own podcast. I got a friend of mine who has his own podcast who says, you really should do your own podcast. And then our PR lady said, you really should do your own podcast. I was on an interview with somebody, and they were like, man, you really should do your own podcast too. And so, throughout the years, everybody's like, you should do your own. And I'm like, man, I'm too busy. I don't have time for this. And so we, in talking with Arnold Jr. and our PR lady, we decided that, okay, we're going to do a podcast. I said, but I actually thought podcasts I said, look, I think they're a little bit tired. I think everybody's interviewing the same people. I think everybody's talking the same thing. You take guest X and the 10 people they're going to interview, I'm asking them the same 10 questions and the answer is the same. So I felt like it was kind of tired, in my opinion, in my own personal opinion. And so I said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this my way. I love to eat, and I'm Cuban and probably similar to Italians. We do everything through food. My family gets together and we sit around and eat and talk. And we want to go have an event and we invite people to lunch or dinner. Tonight I'm going to a dinner. I do a lot through dinners and luncheons. And so I said, I don't want to just talk about the boring stuff, service departments and ROs and effective labor rates that everybody and their grandmother's talking about, right? I do want to interview that service department manager or owner of the dealer and talk about his story. How did he get there? Because I think that's more glamorous than people and a broader audience can reach it. So we created this idea. It's funny because my original name was Listen to the Fat Guy or the Fat Guy Show or something like that. I love that idea, but obviously I got struck down on the name. But that was my first idea because I just wanted to have fun with it, right? And so we came up with this idea that we're going to interview successful people in the industry, in the automotive industry, and out at their favorite restaurant, and we're going to talk about their story, how they got there, kind of a little bio of their life, their favorite place to travel, their favorite car, their favorite food. And then at the end, we would showcase the restaurant that we were at and showcase their food, talk to the owner, and kind of wrap it up at the restaurant. I mean, we've been doing it for maybe a little bit less than a year. We have 50,000 impressions. Between the podcast and the YouTube station, we do about 5,000 views and have a list of people that want to be on the show that we can't keep up with. And so it's just turned out great. I mean, today a show came out and it's evolved into different things, right? So we don't necessarily always do it at a restaurant. Sometimes we don't do it at a restaurant. I did a show where we did it at somebody's house and he cooked while we did the interview. I interviewed one of the county judges for Harris County at his office, no restaurant. The show that came out today is the managing director for the Alley Theater, which is a major theater in the United States based here in Houston. And we interviewed him on stage, and we've interviewed politicians and automotive successful people and just a broad, we interviewed the fire chief. We interviewed restaurant owners. We interviewed the first restaurant that defied the COVID rules. He's the first restaurant in the U.S. that opened, although he couldn't. And his story was fascinating, So we just find these great business people in or out of automotive. Typically ask them where their favorite restaurant is. If they don't have one, we find one. We have a list of restaurants that want us to showcase them. And we go to that restaurant and we just sit down like you're having lunch and talking to a friend, and it's been the success it's been. I never thought it would take off this way. But it's been a great success. I have this saying. I think we're distributors of God's wealth. So I think that I tell people all the time. I come from Cuba, so I am a capitalist. I know what it is to live or to see it through my parents' eyes of having everything taken away and not be capitalist. I am a capitalist, but there's a difference between being capitalist and greedy. So I am a capitalist that believe that we are distributors of God's wealth and we need to give back. And so if anything take away from this show is be good to your people, give them a chance to do right, and find something like Petra Cares that you can be involved with. Because at the end of the day, when you pass away, nobody's going to Troy, my buddy that I told you has this charity, his dad was dying and his dad told him this on his dying moment. He said, Troy, nobody's going to remember how many cars you've sold. They're not going to talk about that, but they're going to talk about how many lives you've impacted.
I'd like to thank Arnold Gacita with Petra Automotive Products for an amazing interview. You can find the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps with the algorithm thingy. Executive producers for the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast are Melissa Marlette and Joe Gibson. It is written, produced, and narrated by me, Brandon Barnett. This episode's featured music is Special J by Tony Sopiano. And check out the full uncut interview with Arnold on InteliChek's YouTube channel, where I geek out over white labeling, Dubai, and the production value of wheels, deals, and mills. InteliChek. Know your competition.